We had exclusive use of the lands and the waters through which the fish flowed.
Everything on the land was owned by a clan.
They had better armament, actually, in that era than the Russians did.
There were signs up, no Indians and dogs allowed.
Here is an Indian moving in, playing a white political game, and being in control. What are you going to do about that?
When my people tell a story, we begin by saying we have been here since time immemorial, since the days when Raven made this land for us. He made our temperate rainy forest teem with edible plants and animals. Our streams and bays filled with salmon each summer. The place overflowed with life and spirits. Foreigners came to our homeland, but we resisted them for more than a century. Eventually, however, there were just too many of them with great ships and cannons. The things that saved us were those that made us great in the old days, our fiercely competitive pride, our intelligence, and ability to adapt. So we fought a new kind of battle for survival with new weapons: money, lawyers, and votes. We understood this new battle instinctively, for even in our ancient warrior days, we were always masters of commerce, politics, and law. According to legend, the Tlingits came to our coastal islands from the continental interior, down mighty river gorges and through the mountains. Later, Haida people settled on our southern boundary and made that their home. The Tlingits and the Haidas prospered here and traded far along the coast in our great canoes, all the way to what is now California. No one dared challenge us. In 1741, though, the first Europeans arrived, Russians. They never even came ashore, but their doctrine of discovery let them claim exclusive rights to trade here in what we now call Southeast Alaska. The Russians sailed away, and our lives continued as always.
Certainly the Southeast Indians had an abundance of resources. They had more than ample fish and wildlife on which they depended. What they were able to do was take the surplus and utilize that for trade with their surrounding neighbors. So what happened was their society and culture was enriched even further. And so they were very wealthy people.
Wealth, prestige, and ancestry were everything in our world. Indeed, our ceremonial life centered around the potlatch, a great feast where wealthy clans gave away vast riches.
So that is, distribution of resources, distribution of wealth, and the giver, prestige and status is increased. Also, it acts very much like a bank because I give everything away. In the future, there is that expectation that I'm going to get some resources when the opposite side holds their potlatch kind of in response to our activities.
According to our law, no offense or damage was ever forgiven or forgotten until balance was restored among the clans, whether through blood or restitution. Usually, blankets, dried fish, or even temporary rights to fish another clan's stream. Everyone knew which clans held fishing rights on which streams.
And I think that every study that's been done of Tlingit people show that they had a highly developed sense of ownership of land. Everything on the land was owned by a clan.
The Russians knew nothing of our laws when they returned in 1799.
In that interim, the Tlingit and the Haida were dealing with the fur traders. One of the major acquisitions that the Tlingits had from the fur traders, especially the American fur traders, were guns, muskets, cannons. They had better armament, actually, in that era than the Russians did. They would be glad to trade furs with Russians or with English or with Americans or with French. They respected trade. That's what the Tlingits were.
The Russians built their trading post, New Archangel, near the stronghold of the Kiksadi clan. The natives called their village Shiatika, today known as Sitka. The Russians accepted native law outside their stockade walls, and the Kiksadis rarely went inside. It was an uneasy peace of mutual trading interest until 1802.
It had deteriorated to a point of adversaries because the Russians enlarged the fort far bigger than, the trading post we thought they were authorized to do. In fact, they came to regard that portion of the land as their own.
That attitude offended the Kiksadis, so they appointed a war chief named Katlian and made a battle plan with other villages. Simultaneously, they attacked New Archangel and other Russian outposts throughout the archipelago. They littered the beach with their enemies' corpses. The Tlingits' victory lasted for only 2 years. In 1804, the Russians returned, this time with a warship and 150 Aleut fighters armed with muskets. The Tlingits retreated from Shiatika, and the Russians built a new, stronger fortress there. The Tlingits resumed a wary peace with the Russians until 1805, when a Russian party foolishly took over a Tlingit salmon stream at Yakutat.
There were protests by the Tlingits against the Russian use of their salmon streams. It was basically theft as far as the Tlingits were concerned. They would be glad to trade, but they could not tolerate it. It was just total anathema under their law that someone would come in and take their fish.
So the Tlingits burned the Russian fort at Yakutat and killed the entire garrison. In time, New Archangel grew into a small city with European refinements, a library, and a theater. The Russians made it their new capital for Russian America, and visiting American and British sea captains called it Paris of the Pacific.
There was a Russian official that visited Alaska. He looked at the situation and said basically that we do not control the situation here. When we want fish, when we want meat, when we want wood, we have to go to the Tlingits. We have not controlled Southeast Alaska at all. It was one of the reasons, in fact, that Russia decided to sell Alaska.
On October 18, 1867, the Tlingits witnessed from their canoes what to them was a preposterous transaction. The American Stars and Stripes replaced the Tsar's double-headed eagle atop the Russian governor's mansion.
My aunt, the one that lived to be 106 years old, she was there when it took place. And they could not understand what the fuss was about, because the Russians only owned what was inside the stockade. They didn't dare go out, and no individual could walk around outside the stockade. So they couldn't understand why they were claiming to sell all of Alaska when all they had was what was inside the fort.
The natives could not foresee that America would bring an end to the world they had known since time immemorial. The end began in 1878, when Americans built the first 2 salmon canneries in southeast Alaska. No creature was more deeply woven into the intricate tapestries of the Tlingit and Haida cultures as the salmon that miraculously returned to feed the people and replenish their spirit.
It was much more than a matter of food. It was as though the cycle of the fish coming from untold thousands of miles to that one stream where the Tlingit and Haidas were was inextricably tied in with the cycle of life of the Tlingit and Haidas. It went to the very core of their tribal existence.
The Tlingits, after the introduction of the canneries in 1878, within the space of a decade or two, they were losers, big-time losers in a hurry. They were losing their basic food supply. They were even losing the areas where they lived.
In 1882, a Tlingit shaman died in an accident working for an American whaling company. Under Tlingit law, his clan took American hostages. They soon released the hostages unharmed, but demanded compensation according to their law. The Americans decided to show whose law was supreme. They sent a heavily armed revenue cutter. The cutter destroyed the village, including all canoes, hunting and fishing gear, and all food supplies, just at the onset of winter. Word of the bombardment spread. Grudgingly to save their lives, the Tlingits and Haidas adapted to American authority. Chief Katashan of Wrangell.
We have eyes. We have sense. We see you are powerful. We do not want to be angry with you. We want to be friends with you. It is not right for such powerful people as you are to take away from poor people like we are. Our creeks and hunting grounds. The time will come when we will not have anything left.
The rush to exploit Alaska's riches only intensified. The canneries quickly learned where native fishermen made their best catch and sent their own fishermen there. In the natives' best fishing areas, canneries built fish traps, enormous contraptions of logs and nets that fished day and night in the paths of migrating salmon, often right in spawning rivers. The traps caught salmon so efficiently the canneries destroyed entire runs to some streams.
You destroy the economy, you destroy the jobs, you destroy the food, you're destroying the culture too. You're destroying their whole way of life. And this is what was happening very quickly.
Not only were natives losing their food and land, but new diseases brought by whites ravaged entire villages with epidemics. More than half the Tlingits and Haidas perished from disease.
In the traditional culture, it was the shaman, along with his knowledge or her knowledge of the medicines, natural medicines, that Tlingits were able to deal with diseases. But when these new diseases came in, flu, influenza, smallpox, the shaman didn't have any powers to deal with those diseases. And it was at this point in time that the Tlinkits began to give up on their shamans and accept Western medicine and Western religion.
And the two often came in a single package delivered by Presbyterian missionaries. They told the natives that Christianity and modern education were the only way to claim a place in this new American world and in a world hereafter. To a despondent people devastated by disease and loss of potency in their own land, there was powerful appeal in the missionaries' offer of medical help and emotional solace in somebody named Jesus. All the natives had to do to receive these blessings, the missionaries told them, was abandon their culture and beliefs.
The native can no longer get his living from the hills, plains, or sea. He must learn our ways or die. A Christian education is his only hope. George J. Beck, missionary.
Well, the goal was clearly acculturation. That is to say, to bring the natives as quickly as possible into the value structure, the belief structure, the institutional structure of white society, of dominant white society. I think it's very important to see that in their day they were progressive, they were reformers, they were seen as extreme liberals in their day, because everyone operated on the assumption that the Indian was vanishing.
There's a great speech by a leader saying, I want my people to become educated. But me, for myself, as a good Tlingit leader, I will not become a Christian because I don't want to abandon those who have gone before me. But he orders that the rest of his clan go out and get educated.
My mother's clan opposed Christianity, but over their objections she went to live at Mrs. Amanda McFarland's Presbyterian boarding school for girls in Wrangell. She was 13, the adopted mixed-blood daughter of a powerful Stikine Tlingit chief. The Presbyterians called her Matilda, or Tilly.
For Tilly and many other young natives, the missionaries' world stood in bright and hopeful contrast to disease and the flood tide of American bootleggers and gamblers.
My mother Tilly grew up with the missionaries and married my father Louis, also a mixed-blood native Christian. They traveled around southeast Alaska preaching the gospel in Tlingit until my father was killed in a boating accident. Suddenly, Mother was a 22-year-old widow with 3 sons.
The young widow's savior was the Reverend Sheldon Jackson, the chief architect of the Presbyterians' acculturation strategy in Alaska. Jackson worked tirelessly to raise money and build schools for natives. He hired Tilly as a house mother at the Presbyterian Sitka Industrial Training School. Tilly sympathized with the cultural pain of her students torn between 2 worlds. She translated into English many of the old tales the elders told her as a girl. Her students, lonely for home, loved to hear her read them. But Tilly ended her stories with a contradictory warning.
Raven is a myth. The shaman is an impostor. Old customs have bound us like chains of steel, but the missionaries have brought us a light, God's word, which will yet save the remnant of our race.
My grandmother was, I say, a victim of the missionaries, that the Indian ways, myths and legends and language and social laws were, quote, wicked, unquote. During the rearing of her 3 sons, she believed that it was wicked for them to speak the Tlingit language. She even spanked them for not speaking English.
In time, Tilly Paul sent her sons to the shining light of acculturation, General Richard Pratt's Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania.
General Pratt taught us to work like Americans, behave like Americans, and think like Americans. He told us this was the way to succeed in our own lives and help our people.
At Carlisle, young William Paul and his brother Louis took a special interest in the printing shop. Both brothers went on to college, and William even went to seminary, learning to read Latin, Greek, and Hebrew to study Scripture. The Paul brothers enjoyed better treatment outside Alaska than their people did back home. Alaska natives could not be citizens unless 5 whites testified they were civilized. So only a few natives could vote or even hold legal title to their ancestral lands, and only if they bought it from whites.
When you think you own the land to begin with, and you don't know how you lost it, you have some difficulty going up to somebody and buying the land that you've always occupied.
Meanwhile, at the Sitka Industrial Training School, Tilly Paul organized her brightest students into a Christian public service group. After graduation, some of them met to discuss the discrimination they suffered.
They were angry, a deep anger inside of them that they were considered second-class citizens. And they were determined to have all the attributes of first-class citizens.
They wanted to be able to compete with the new culture that was coming in. Because of the caste and the clan system, we were very, very competitive people.
In 1912, they created a new organization to advance their cause.
The purpose of this organization shall be to assist and encourage the native in his advancement from his native state to his place among the cultivated races of the world, to oppose, discourage, and overcome the narrow injustice of race prejudice, and to aid in the development of the territory of Alaska.
The Alaska Native Brotherhood, or the ANB, was America's first native-led civil rights organization. Ironically, the most influential founder of the Alaska Native Brotherhood was not originally from Alaska. Peter Simpson was a Tsimshian Indian, born in coastal Canada, who later moved to southeast Alaska.
We Native Alaskans want to find out why we cannot become American citizens. When a native discovers a ledge of gold bearing quartz, the mining law will not let him hold it in his own name. He must go find his white friend and take him to the place and have it put in his friend's name. We have a right to be judged by our Christian and civilized lives. Peter Simpson.
Peter Simpson spoke for the new modern native when he urged traditional elders not to impose tribal obligations on the younger generation.
But as long as we like to stand on the threshold and step on the 2 floors, white man's floor and old custom floor, we will never make any headway toward the goal we are after, American citizenship. Education, good character, truth, and honesty is the style today, not the old uncles and old customs.
This was a conviction shared both by the government, manifest through the U.S. Bureau of Education, which operated native schools. It was the view of the Presbyterian mission, and it was the view of the founders of the Alaska Native Brotherhood. To put it vulgarly, to become white people.
We could not use our own language. In fact, you couldn't even join the organization if you were going to use the Tlingit language only. You could only join it if you're an English-speaking person.
But that wasn't all. Peter Simpson believed that natives must give up their clan rivalries, that tribalism give way to unity through the ANB.
He was pretty much known as a peacemaker. At the convention, the battles would get really hot, and fiery on the floor. And he would say, well, let's sing Onward Christian Soldiers, which is the main song of the Alaska Native Brotherhood, and then he would pray or ask someone to pray, getting them back into focus. So he was very instrumental in keeping peace within the Grand Camp, which was not a very easy thing to do.
it would have been marvelous to have seen him, to have known him, because obviously he was a man with great spiritual quality and great inspiration. Also a practical man. He was a shipbuilder. He owned his own shipyard over at Ketchikan. He was not a monk. He was a man of the people.
In 1918, Tilly Paul's youngest son, Louis, returned to Sitka from college and military service. He joined the ANB, which had grown to 200 members in 12 towns. Young Louis Paul convinced Peter Simpson that natives must claim their citizenship, not wait for white men to grant it to them. He also understood that to succeed, the ANB needed the traditional clan leaders, many of whom couldn't join because they spoke little or no English. Most owned small businesses, though, or were commercial fishermen, translating their culture's high regard for wealth and status into the American idiom. The otherwise conservative clan elders knew the ANB, with its brash young leaders, was their best hope against discrimination that favored white businesses and the canneries. They needed the ANB, and it needed their prestige and pocketbooks.
I believe that is the reason why they changed their attitude about speaking the Tlingit language in the meeting. I think it was obvious that some of the major contributors were being left out of the organization because of that prohibition.
But it's also cultural. And so these people did not become non-Indian simply because they became Christian and acculturated and Presbyterian and educated. And they carried pieces of their Aboriginal heritage with them.
It was a compromise with old custom that Louis Paul believed the ANB had to make. He was patient and could work with the elders in their long, deliberative ways. But Louis and Peter Simpson needed a different kind of leader to challenge discrimination. They needed a warrior, and they found him in 1920 when Louis's brother William returned to Alaska as the first Tlingit lawyer.
I think it's clear to say that William Paul not only energized the organization in a new way, but he also politicized the organization. He took it into politics, and he did so from several motives, one of which was to make it more effective and to pursue a clear political agenda. But he also had personal political ambition, and he used the Alaska Native Brotherhood as his personal political base from which to launch himself into politics. He did both very, very successfully, extremely successfully.
My father was either loved or hated. Either they believed thoroughly in him or they despised him.
Anyone who knew William Paul understood that he wasn't afraid of a fight. He believed in the confrontational when it would serve the purpose.
He was very strong in what he believed, which I had to admire him for that. And I told him, William, I think you missed your calling. You should have been a preacher. He said, no, I'm right where I should be.
I am opposed to discrimination on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude in all matters directly affected by law or public institutions. I personally believe that conservation of fish means the abolishment of traps. On account of my present views, cannerymen, trapmen, and their dependents call me a dangerous man, a radical. My so-called radicalism is nothing more than the application of the Golden Rule to the practical affairs of government.
While William was outspoken, his brother Louis had other strengths that mattered more with some natives.
Louis had more grasp of the culture. I heard William Paul speak to the delegates one time in Tlingit. I could hear the remarks of the older people saying, he thinks like a white man. He may have been right on the issue, right on target, but how he approached our people was off target.
So the brothers worked as a team. William, the brutally hard-headed strategist, relied on his brother Louis, the charming advocate, to sell his plan to the ANB membership. The ANB took its first steps into hardball politics when it challenged the packing companies and their fish traps. It was David against Goliath when in 1922 they sent William Paul to Congress to plead their case.
It results in terrible hardships on the natives of the territory who depend on fishing for their bread and butter. Those natives have been facing starvation for the last 2 years. Depletion is now almost an accomplished fact. The remedy is to abolish the trap. We have the right to live in something better than poverty.
Paul also sharply criticized the so-called Federal Brigade, the federal appointees in Alaska who virtually ran the territory, for their bias against Alaska fishermen and in favor of the large canning companies. It was a theme he would repeat for 2 decades. To overcome communication problems with many island-bound villages, the ANB published a newspaper. For a decade, the Alaska fisherman was synonymous with the ANB political agenda, opposition to fish traps, and its founder and passionate editorial writer, William Paul.
The fight for democracy depends on the natives of Alaska. No one suffers more from the rule of foreigners than they do. With us there will be joined all those who love liberty and justice. For the fight is not for a race or a class, but for everyone who plans to die in Alaska. This will exclude most deputy marshals, carpetbaggers, bureaucrats, and foreign fishermen who only come for the season of fishing. If you agree with us, join us. If not, you are no different from King George III.
Alaskan fishermen was extraordinarily important in the work of the Alaska Native Brotherhood. It provided a way for William Paul to inform his voters, to broaden his political base, and to keep the pressure on his opponents, his political opponents. And it also alerted the white establishment in Alaska, both those who felt positively toward natives, of whom there were many, and those who didn't, that the Indian was a player.
And there was another part of the white man's game that the ANB was ready to play: political horse trading. They aligned with former delegate to Congress, Judge James Wickersham, a local hero who had won more home rule for Alaska. In 1922, the ANB delivered a winning margin of native votes to the Wickersham slate of local candidates.
Well, I think what happened was that William Paul, having demonstrated his political prowess and his willingness to play the political game, really threatened the white political power structure. And so the white leadership in Wrangell decided to challenge William Paul. And I think that everybody knew that this was coming. There's a letter from the Wrangell City Council or the Wrangell election judges saying we're going to challenge Indian voting.
They challenged William Paul's clan uncle, Charlie Jones, a staunch ANB member and highly regarded clan leader. He went to the polls with Tilly Paul Tamery, William's mother, now remarried.
And I think it was utterly no accident whatsoever that Tilly Paul Tamery also goes to the polling place at the same time that Charlie Jones does, and that William Paul then takes the case to court and defends these 2 Indians who have been accused of violating the law by voting when they weren't citizens. William Paul wins that case.
With native citizenship and votes now affirmed by the courts, the ANB mobilized throughout the archipelago to build a solid native voting bloc. It took dozens of ANB community leaders and hundreds of grassroots workers and voters.
The English language at that time was a formidable barrier. We had to train our voters, and we were able to memorize the ones that we wanted to vote for, how the names were written, how to pronounce the names.
In the 1924 election, tallies came in slowly from outlying villages. But the canoe vote, as some white men called the native vote, won out. The ANB delivered a resounding victory to friendly candidates. The canoe vote also elected the very first Alaska native to the territorial legislature, William Paul.
This was a big wake-up call. because he delivered enough votes that he could swing a close election. The white political leadership went berserk over this. Here is an Indian moving in, playing by white rules, playing the white political game, and being in control. What are you going to do about that?
There is an Alaskan dictator. His name is William Paul, the Indian attorney. William Paul, self-appointed dictator, stands convicted by his own acts of being a hypocrite, a purveyor of falsehood and misrepresentation, and a positive menace to the higher aims of American citizenship.
The attack was led by John Troy, publisher and editor of the Alaska Daily Empire in Juneau. William Paul used the Alaska fishermen to fight back.
We found that there was a political ring composed of the attorneys of the large cannery and mine corporations who operated by and with the Juneau Empire and who controlled the Democratic or Republican federal brigade for their common purpose at the expense of resident Alaskans. Until the corruption which emanates from the mind and pen of John W. Troy ceases to flow in the territory, the fight will continue, and we will prevail. For though they be desperate men, our cause is just.
In the territorial legislature, Paul was a shrewd political infighter, winning for natives workers' compensation, widows' pensions, and other protections previously denied his people. He spoke so passionately of the plight of widows during legislative debate that the stenographer, enthralled, forgot her typing, then broke into tears.
We must have a white man's party, not alone for the protection of the white people, but because the welfare of the Indians demands it. Unless controlled through illiterate Indians, voting en masse as Indians rather than as individual units, is quickly terminated, racial antagonism will be developed that it will take a lifetime to eradicate. John Troy, publisher.
The demand for a literacy bill comes almost entirely from the Juneau Empire and for the express purpose of stopping Indians from voting. The Juneau Empire is the organ of the fish trap interests. The Indians have combined with the white fishermen to abolish the fish traps. Would it not be a fine stroke if the empire could hamstring the enemies of the traps?
With racial tensions running high in the territorial legislature, the ANB fought the voting literacy bill. Representative William Paul lacked the votes to kill it, but he managed to water it down to the point of ineffectiveness through crafty parliamentary tactics. He won re-election in 1926.
In 1928, William Paul stood for election to the legislature for a third time and was on the verge of victory. It looked like he was going to be able to sweep in again.
Just days before the election, newspapers reported that the canned salmon industry paid William Paul to help lobby Congress for a more stable system of fish trap leases.
So here was William Paul taking money from the enemy. The newspapers hit on the same day with the story. It was banner headlines in most of the Southeast newspapers. It was an orchestrated campaign, and it worked. William Paul lost the election in 1928.
The revelation discredited Paul, and by implication, the Alaska Native Brotherhood. For the first time, defiant opponents rose within the ANB to challenge his leadership and ethics. The growing opposition to William Paul had as much to do with his personality and style as with ethics and politics.
William Paul was a difficult person. If you didn't agree with him, you ran the risk of being attacked publicly and being attacked very, very aggressively. He could be very cantankerous.
Bill, you're just always right. Well, I am always right, you know, just like that. But that's the kind of stubbornness that got us a lot of things we needed.
He could usually, by persuasion and even browbeating, get his way. But, you know, a man convinced against his will is still of the same opinion.
Paul's faction maintained control of the ANB, but the allegations about his character hurt. His opponents never let the uneasy suspicions about his honesty go away. However, like him or not, trust him or not, William Paul was not going away.
I believe in the voice of the people, and so I have no complaint at the result of the last election. It is the people's wish, so may it be. In regard to my future plans, I have this to say, that I will not deviate one particle from my past political program.
And he got his chance to prove it in 1929, when Ketchikan Public Schools expelled most Native students, claiming they should attend federal Indian schools. Nettie Jones never thought to challenge discrimination until her daughter Irene was expelled.
I think in those days, especially a woman, you didn't expect her to stand up and say what she believed. I think maybe she did it because she didn't want people pushing her around. And her kids was, included in that. She believed that she had as much right as anybody else, to be treated fairly.
So with help from the Alaska Native Brotherhood, Nettie Jones sued the Ketchikan schools. The ANB's attorney who tried the case without fee was William Paul. In court, William Paul showed that all the practical reasons the schools gave for expelling the Native students, like overcrowding, were lies. The ANB won the case, defeating in Alaska the then accepted national doctrine of separate but equal schools for non-whites. The Natives' victory came 25 years before the U.S. Supreme Court ordered integration for the rest of America's schools. However, in Ketchikan in 1929, Nettie Jones had exposed wounds of anger and shame no one wanted to face.
After the trial was over with, she said it was so funny that the Indians wouldn't talk to her and the whites wouldn't talk to her. Nobody would talk to her.
In only 17 years, the Alaska Native Brotherhood had achieved its political goals. Natives were citizens. They could vote. They could attend public schools. Nonetheless, the idea that they could reclaim their land and fish seemed radical even to William Paul, until the day in 1925 when Peter Simpson took him aside for a word.
And said, Willie, who owns this land? Well, Dad sensed that this was something very, very important. It was so solemn. And he looked up at Peter and said, we do. Then fight for it, Peter says. It's like the laying on of the hands. It's like being ordained. It's like the Almighty saying, go for it. Very, very serious.
At age 44, William Paul was ANB Grand Camp president for its pivotal 1929 convention in Haines, Alaska. He was back at the zenith of Native leadership after his school case victory, but he knew a land claim suit would need hundreds of foot soldiers. Once again, he enlisted the influence of his political ally, Judge James Wickersham, to help convince the ANB. Judson Brown was a 16-year-old observer at the convention.
Wickersham did not try to pull any punches. He did not try to make it sound easy. He made it very plain to them that it would take time and that it would take money.
It would also take courage. William Paul called for a show of hands. The Alaska Native Brotherhood and the Alaska Native Sisterhood voted unanimously to sue the United States of America for taking their land and fish. Under the Constitution, the Tlingits and Haidas needed permission from Congress to sue the United States. They got it in 1935. Congress required, though, that the Tlingits and Haidas, two distinct peoples, must form a unified central council and file a single lawsuit. It was easier for the government that way. Ironically, William Paul, always a Republican himself, nonetheless became an insider with Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal Democratic government that favored native rights advocates. In Washington, Paul took every opportunity to criticize, even embarrass the Alaska Federal Brigade before their new Democratic bosses. There was no shortage of people eager to see William Paul stumble and fall, and he did. In 1936, Paul was legal counsel to a Senate committee holding hearings in Alaska.
So William Paul came back to Alaska in 1936 with a lot of power. One day, while they were holding hearings in Ketchikan, a process server showed up and served William Paul with papers. He was being sued for violation of legal ethics. And he was served right while he was serving as counsel of this Senate committee.
The time and place were perfect to cause Paul maximum embarrassment. The Bar Association investigated and found that Paul withheld settlement funds from 5 native clients after a lengthy and complicated case. It was a serious breach of legal ethics.
Historians have commented, and I think correctly, that there are any number of members of the Anglo Bar who could have been disbarred for the same sorts of things in that day and age. Why then did they go after William Paul? They went after William Paul because he had enemies, because his style was aggressive, and because he had power.
In 1937, the court disbarred William Paul, and he was again an outsider. And he was driven further from influencing the land suit when, in 1939, the ANB created a separate Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian tribes to file the land claims as Congress required. The new Central Council still counted on the Alaska Native Sisterhood and Brotherhood to raise money for the land suit through bake sales and sporting events. Native elders carefully placed quarters in donation cans, saying, "This is for my grandchildren." Many Tlingits and Haidas were beginning to embrace their fading traditional culture. In 1940, Wrangell natives installed Charlie Jones, the defendant in the voting rights case, as the senior clan leader of the Wrangell area. Government officials joined natives praising Jones.
He was puzzled, so he went to Dad and said, "Willie, I don't understand these white people. A few years ago, I had to prove that I had abandoned Indian ways in order so I could vote. And now today they say I'm an Indian. They even call me chief." He says, "I don't understand these white people."
While some whites thought it was all right to be an Indian at a great cultural event, others had a different idea day by day.
It's hard for some people to believe in this day and age that it was not that long ago. There were signs up, "No Indians allowed," or "No Indians and dogs allowed." So I thought, well, I like dogs. Dog is man's best friend. And I would think I would rather have a dog for a friend than some of the people I knew at the time.
In 1945, natives determined it was time for those signs to come down. So the ANB and ANS fought for a territorial anti-discrimination law and won. It was the first such civil rights legislation in the United States, drafted by a young territorial assistant attorney general, Fred Paul, William's son. Finally, in 1958, the U.S. Court of Claims ruled in favor of the Tlingits and Haidas. So the natives asked for $70 million for the land and the salmon taken from them. It took 10 more years, until 1968, for the court to make an award. Only $7.5 million. Compensation only for the land and at its value in 1902. The court denied their claim for the salmon, saying no one could own migratory fish.
I think the Court of Claims clearly missed the proposition that we had exclusive use and right to use of the lands and the waters through which the fish flowed, and that no one anywhere in southeast Alaska or anyone else or anywhere else had dared to assert any right to those fish. There was a strong, almost overwhelming sense that we should appeal the award.
William Paul thought the judgment award was too small and denial of the fishery outrageous.
Land is ours. Let us fight for it. Notwithstanding the decision of the Court of Claims, that decision is wrong. We should not rest till our highest court says otherwise. I can save a part of it, and I am not beholden to anybody. If you want to fight for your land, send me what money you can raise.
The Central Council reluctantly accepted the $7.5 million judgment, along with the court's rejection of their claim to the salmon.
Fish is the foundation of the culture of the Tlingit people. And now we have an opinion by a respectable court that the Indians never owned the fisheries. And we have the Indians agreeing. I believe that that convention was that they were traitors to their own culture. Traitors.
It appeared that the mathematics of the Supreme Court accepting our case on appeal didn't look very promising. On the one hand, those of us who proposed that we should accept the award and use the award to make it possible for some of the elderly to realize benefits now. The second phase was that we should use the monies also to assist the statewide land claims movement.
The Central Council gave $100,000 from their judgment award to a new statewide coalition of natives. The Tlingit and Haida decision opened a path for similar native land claims all across Alaska, and the new statewide group had a strong hold card to play. An enormous oil field had been discovered on Alaska's North Slope. To avoid dozens of time-consuming land claims all across Alaska and get at the oil bonanza in a hurry, Congress passed the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act in 1971. The act cleared native land claims, setting the stage for oil development and the modern economic era of Alaska. Instead of reservations for Alaska Natives, Congress created native corporations, endowing them with millions of dollars and vast tracts of land. Some say the statewide land claims movement germinated years earlier at a native boarding school in Sitka. A young Eskimo, Charlie Edwardson Jr., or Etuk as his people call him, heard William Paul lecture about civil rights and land claims. Etuk asked William Paul for a reading list and began to study Native American legal history. They stayed in touch.
I appreciated as I watched Charlie in action that his mentor at younger stages of his life had been William L. Paul, and they both of them had their styles in terms of never avoiding confrontation if it would help to advance the issue from their perspective.
In 1966, Etuk organized several Eskimo elders to file a land claim. They chose as their first attorney 83-year-old William Paul, who was living in Seattle and had been readmitted to the bar. Eventually, William Paul opposed the congressional land claim settlement, warning that it failed to protect native subsistence hunting and fishing rights. He may have been right, because today, sportsmen, natives, and commercial interests still clash over subsistence.
When my people tell a story, we begin by saying we have been here since time immemorial.
In 1977, William Paul Sr. died in Seattle at age 91. In death, most natives forgave his faults, honoring him as a tribal elder and a courageous civil rights warrior. Some remembered the story William Paul told them about the day in 1925 when Peter Simpson took him aside and said, "William, the land is yours. Fight for it." Funding for The Land Is Ours was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding is provided by the Alaska Humanities Forum, Smith Barney, and the following funders.